I have started the recording and live as well.
Thank you. Hi everyone, welcome to today's session. We can introduce ourselves in the chat box. Maybe you can tell us your name, the country you're joining us from. Thanks for joining. We can introduce ourselves in the chat box. Thank you, Meshach. Good to have you here. We're also excited to have everyone on board for today's discussions. As we introduce ourselves, maybe we can give the rest like a minute or two to try join. So maybe I can introduce myself also. My name is Valentine Chebet. I'll be today's moderator. Currently, I'm the program coordinator at Climate Justice Advocacy. I'm a strategy and project management professional, and I also volunteer a lot in the space of climate action, and mostly in the creating awareness and all. So I'm really excited to be here to host this session. Welcome all. So can we have other people introducing themselves?
Well, hello everyone. Greetings from Uganda. Dr. Mgeni Nathan. I work with a Great Lakes Peace Center in Uganda. This is a hub for, that promotes the sustainable development goals in southwestern Uganda. So I'm actually very glad to be part of this meeting.
Maybe you can mute. There's some noise. Okay, thank you for that.
Yes, someone mutes this one is my.
Yeah, maybe the hosts can help me with that. So, okay, maybe we can go ahead. So just to inform you that we hold these webinars twice a month, and today's discussion will be around Indigenous youth and climate activism, empowering the next generation. So today's topic aligns with our organization's mission of amplifying voices and actions of vulnerable communities who are the Indigenous youth. And today's panelists will shed light on the challenges faced by Indigenous communities and the crucial role of the youth in addressing climate change. So through our bi-monthly webinars, we aim to create a platform for meaningful discussions, knowledge sharing and collaboration among experts, activists, and concerned individuals like all of us, you and me, everyone who has joined this conversation. So we encourage active participation from everyone, all stakeholders. Please share your insights, ask questions. You can raise your hand or you can drop your questions in the chat box, so that maybe we can handle that once the speaker has finished with their presentation. You can also share your experiences around the discussion that we have today, because our aim is to have this collective learning and progress for everyone. So today's speaker, do I call them panelists? We have 3 individuals. So we have Dr. Mina Ogbanga, we have Crispin Ngakani, and we have Yahuza Ismail. So you'll allow me to share with you a brief of their bios, just a short snippet, then they can talk about themselves. So the co-hosts can help me admit individuals who are joining. So we have Dr. Mina Ogbanga. Dr. Mina is a Ford Foundation Fellow with over 23 years demonstrated experience working on environmental and community rights from a gender lens. Dr. Ogbanga is a multi-award-winning development activist and SDG advocate. She's an associate professor, widely published and strong promoter of environmental sustainability and public policy. Then second panelist, we have Crispin Ngakani. He's a climate activist and a climate clock DRC lead from Democratic Republic of Congo. Then we have Yahuza Ismail. He is a trainer on climate justice, activism, and indigenous solutions. So I think that's that for the introductions of our amazing panelists today. Yeah, so as I said before, our topic, or what we're going to talk about today, is Indigenous youth and climate activism, empowering the next generation. So I think it's only right for me to allow our speakers, panelists, to introduce themselves. Just a brief introduction for people to see you or to hear what, yes, Dr. Mina is here. Yeah, just a brief introduction from our panelists for everyone who has attended this, to get to learn about who you are and what you do majorly in this space of the climate action space and environment. And then, yeah, just briefly, and then we are going to dive directly into the questions. So we can start with Dr. Mina Ogbanga. Maybe give us a brief introduction of who you are and what you do, just shortly, and then we can go ahead with our discussions for today.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon from Nigeria, and I feel completely excited to be here. Incidentally, I'll be doing without the video, else we have a very riotous network around here today, especially. So I don't want you to cut me off at any time. And my name is Dr. Mina, and I am the founding CEO of the Center for Development Support Initiatives, an organization that has been working on climate action since 1999. In fact, the organization was founded in 2000, November 11th. And so we have been working on climate action, carrying out activities around the SDGs, the MDGs, SDGs for recent, MDGs for past, and then we have been working setting up environmental clubs since 2000. So you can imagine at the youth level, it has been a critical thing for us because we have been trying to provide room for emerging leaders in the environmental space and emerging leaders in taking climate action and protecting their environment. So, and that has done a lot in terms of mindset orientation. Yes, I'm also an associate professor, a professor of environmental social work. My focus is on mainstreaming youth participation in environmental policies and advocacy. So it is, I don't know how to thank the organizers of this event. I think they have just done marvelously well, bringing such a very contemporary issue to the fore. And so I want to thank each and everyone who put this together. I want to say thank you for giving me the humble opportunity to be part of this. I want to thank Valentine Chibet and everybody else in the team. Please, please, please take this as a big honor from all the way from Nigeria, from me, and I hope we can do a lot more together. So by way of introduction, this is just me. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Dr. Mina. We really appreciate your kind words, and yeah, we look forward to being of impact together. And then our next speaker, Crispin Ngakani. Brief introduction of who you are.
Yeah, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, thank very much all present. It's my pleasure to be in this meeting, inviting this meeting. Thanks all person, all organizer, and all person who are joining this meeting. So I'm Crispin Ngakani, a climate change activist from DRC. I'm a lead of Climate Club DRC, focal point. So I started my engagement on 2018. That's why I was started as a climate activist. I'm just making many activities like, for example, advocacy about climate change, leadership, match, and the other with local community and the authority in Goma City, in the eastern part of DRC. So I'm so very pleased for this to join this meeting. So I hope it will be an interactive meeting about question, and all of person would like to know about climate activity. Thank you very much for you.
Okay, thank you so much, Crispin. We're excited to have you, and thank you for the honors to join us for this session. Then our third panelist is Yahuza Ismail. Please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Yahuza Ismail from Nigeria. It's my pleasure to be part of this wonderful conversation. I'm actually a climate activist who is well-trained in MSTGC in Tanzania, Climate Justice Academy, with over 4 years of experience in addressing climate change through tree planting campaign. I work in the northeastern part of Nigeria. I'm currently working with Center for Advocacy, Transparency and Accountability Initiative. As an advocacy-based organizations, we work towards empowering young people across communities for them to be ambassadors of climate change and how we can engage with government and stakeholders in coming up with some of the green skills across our locality. Recently, I was able to facilitate a training as a boot camp where I was able to train over 50 young climate activists across Nigeria, which was held in Abuja. Recently, I also facilitated another session, I think, in Maiduguri. That's over. I will be stopping here because I'm so glad to be part of these wonderful conversations. I look forward for the conversations, and I'm glad to meeting Dr. Mina of Banga. I look forward for more learning. Thank you all.
Okay, thank you so much, Ismail. We are indeed thrilled to have the three of you as our panelists today. So I think we'll just go diving straight into some of the questions that will guide our conversation today. As I said before, our topic is on Indigenous youth and climate activism. empowering the next generation. So the first question that we'll just be going around for every question. So our first question is for our participants and everyone who is watching to really have an understanding. When we talk about Indigenous youth or Indigenous community, what do we really mean? And who are these people? How would you define an Indigenous youth and community? And how, maybe to just marry the two questions, how has climate change impacted these Indigenous communities and maybe their traditional ways of living? So we'll just start, I think the way I'd gone, we can start with Dr. Amina. Dr. Amina, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. I was trying to navigate, yes, but I feel, I think you can all hear me now, right?
We can.
Can,
Yes.
can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so when we talk about indigenous youth, for us in our project, when we talk about indigenous youth, we're talking about youth from traditional communities, youth from local communities, host communities, and youth who are vulnerable in their own way, are not necessarily based in the urban areas that are priority areas of how will I call it, priority areas of urban areas. And these are like distinct, they are distinct, and I often call them my distinct social and cultural groups, because they share things like when you talk about ancestral ties within the areas, talk about natural resources that they work with, so occupy a certain area, either by virtue of being displaced or by virtue of being due to natural or human-made situations that displaces them and moves them from one place to another. So in essence, what I mean is those traditional youths based in their different communities. We have what we call our host communities and all that. So those host communities, and the youth that stay in those areas, in those IDP camps that are localized within a certain geographical framework, those are the ones that we refer to as indigenous youths. You understand? Those are the ones we refer to as indigenous youth. And, you're asking about how our climate action has impacted on them. My God, this indigenous youth, one thing you can't rule out when it comes to human engagement is the fact that everybody has something they can offer. You only need to facilitate that process for it to come out. You understand? So because they're indigenous youth does not mean that they're stupid, they can't contribute. They have already been eating long before we came into the picture. I don't know if I'm understood. These people were eating, these people were carrying out activities, these people were doing different things to the picture. So apparently they have been applying and mainstreaming local practices, indigenous practices that has sustained them, and has indirectly also reduced their vulnerabilities due to the kind of things that they do to climate action. So they know when flood comes, what they do. They put floodplains, they know what to do when there's a drought, they know what. So those are some basic steps. They may not have been cultured about it, they may not have been professional about it, but they have been applying indigenous methodology. So you see that when we talk about building capacities of young people, we're not trying to build it in such a way that we tell them to throw away all their local indigenous practices that are custom to their localities, but we're trying to encourage them to know that this same practice, we can even facilitate you doing the same thing in a better way. So this has also helped them. So through our training and capacity strengthening opportunities, you build their capacities on environmental education, climate education, and then you'll be able to see how they marry all that is happening around them, give them a context now on as to all that is happening around them and all what they've been doing, and matching it to these new ideas that are bringing to them. So for want of time, I just want to make sure that the three take home here is that indigenous are akin to traditional, are akin to custom based with synonyms and with mutual practice within a kind of geographical area. And then also they are very good tools for environmental promotion and sustainability.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Amina. That was very insightful. Crispin? maybe you can give us your understanding of Indigenous youth and communities. Crispin?
Yeah, thanks once more for giving the floor, the others. So for my answer for about the indigenous people, it's quite simply for me the person who having a right to any land and claiming to be the first inhabitant or first occupier of any environment. So, that is the first conception of an indigenous people. So, the impact of climate change on their traditional way of life. In other words, people live from small activities in their fields and the food crop, for example, and they are very uncertain, connected throughout their way of life. The impact lacking to climate change, such as food, several those affect their field, rural activities, and the many other, and that this affect their daily life and making them as vulnerable possible. That is on a few words I can deny about indigenous people and the indigenous local community where they living that.
Okay. Thank you, Crispin, for that. Ismail?
Well, when we speak about indigenous people and indigenous communities, this is actually coming down to the grassroots communities, people that are living, a group of people living in a particular community who are native to particular religions or territory and maintain a particular cultural, languages, and other social practices that have been passed down through generations. These are what is actually classified indigenous people living in a particular community. So when I speak around the youth, these are the youthful populations among the indigenous people that are living within this particular group, who have the capacity, who have the power, who have the knowledge in driving positive changes in their community through activisms, through grassroots engagements, and many more. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Ismail, sorry. So that is very insightful, and I think it gives us a bit of understanding on what we are talking about or where our conversation is pegged today. And Dr. Amina touched on the indigenous youth and stroke communities, and in relation also to climate change. So our next question will be around how can we ensure that these indigenous youth and communities have a seat at the table when it comes to decision-making processes regarding climate change and environmental policies? Dr. Amina?
Okay, so how can they have a seat on the table? You can't give what you don't have. So the first thing to do in every kind of thing, especially when it comes to delicate issues like climate issues, sustainability issues, you don't go in like somebody who doesn't understand. So the first level is the capacity strengthening. And that, the first level for us actually is the needs assessment to identify the gaps in the first place. So we do a needs assessment to identify, to have some level of baseline, to know what do they know and to know what do they need to know. So that baseline, we widely often publish it to share thoughts with others on the gaps that exist among indigenous youth, traditional based youth, and all those things. So that informs your next plan of action. You cannot design a capacity strengthening program on the premise that you know all what young people need. Young people is with them or without. If you don't involve them, it's as good as you're not inclusive. So at that point, you need to hear from them because they wear the shoe, they know where it pinches, they know what they need, they know what their priorities are. So at that point, you mainstream young people's participation, identifying their priority needs in terms of climate action, what the gaps are, and this will help you now to design your next level of activity, which is the capacity strengthening program. So we do that through the design, maybe like utilizing our manuals, our climate action manuals, we now strengthen their capacity in the areas that they need skills, they need information, education, and they need communication tools. So, there's a sequence to everything. So for them to be able to sit on the table, first of all, you need to know that there's a gap that exists, acknowledge it and address it. You address it through the capacity strengthening program. After addressing it through the capacity strengthening program, they are now empowered to promote advocacy practices in different ways. They're now empowered to identify that they have a problem, and they also have an idea towards what they think the solution could be. So you see that they are part of their own development process, and they contribute now to the conversation. At that point, they take ownership of the process and the change that you want to bring about. And this attracts them to leaders who will now be opportuned, based on the advocacy processes, to put them on the table for them to represent the youth constituency. And from there, they are able to communicate their needs, and they're able to present these challenges, and they're able to push for solutions. You understand? So those are my thoughts on that.
Thank you so much. So putting structure in place and getting to understand that we already have this challenge, and now what's the way forward. Thank you, Dr. Mina. Crispin, maybe you can shed some light on that. The question is around how can we ensure that the indigenous youth have a seat on the table when it comes to decision-making processes, mostly regarding climate change and environmental policies.
Yeah, let me put one to center there on this question. So, about the guarantee that can be involved in throughout our ways, our pressure, and our action on the ground that we can carry out by calling on world decision maker, political leaders, as well as activities to take into account indigenous young people, because they are as affected as possible by climate crisis. So about action I would like to take is there must be a decision-making charter initiated by climate activists and submitted to political decision makers. The world leaders demanded the major involvement of indigenous youth in environmental issue and climate change, and this must be ensured through regular and rigorous monitoring. So that's why the way to make climate political. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Crispin. Ismail?
Okay. Hi, Valentine.
Hi.
Okay, can I continue? Can I go ahead?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much actually for this question. I think from my own perspective and my own understanding, for us to engage indigenous people to have a seat at the decision-making table in terms of environmental policies, decision-making, and many more. Number one thing I think we need to consider is an issue of inclusion. We need to promote inclusiveness across grassroots communities, whereby indigenous people will have the opportunity to be selected and be informed in terms of decision-making processes. Let me give an example with some of our major climate conversations that are actually taking place across Africa, at the locality, at the national, international, and global level. Let me start with LCOI, Local Conference of Youth, that is normally being held across national communities. At some point, some of the indigenous people don't even have a seat to come and share their own narrative, to come and share their own experience, or for them to come and share their own input. I would like to highlight the issue of indigenous people in terms of ethical extensionism. Looking at the indigenous people, we usually, most especially in Africa, we usually pay much more attention in terms of our cultural heritage and religion perspective. There are other locally solutions that we have across communities that are going to create a more sustainable solutions if given an opportunity to these indigenous people for them to contribute their quota. But sometimes they are being neglected or keeping them aside, thinking that they cannot speak English, they cannot do this and that. This is the reason why some of the opportunities are not actually coming to them. I can also talk more around issue of corruptions. Corruption is actually contributing factor for some of the people for them to have access to some of the major meetings and major other conferences whereby they can be able to contribute their quota in the decision-making processes. We have our, aside from some of the COP28, COP27, which is usually held. We have the one which was recently held in Africa. I forgot about the particular locations that it was held. So these are all opportunities for indigenous people for them to have a seat to contribute their quota in the decision-making processes. Alongside some of the indigenous people, most of the solutions are not localized. The solutions are just given in a very secondary solutions or tertiary solutions that are actually above their knowledge. And most importantly, most of the best and sustainable solutions require cheaper resources, but we normally go for the bigger solutions with more resources and which is not going to be sustainable at the end of the day. And most at times, the indigenous people don't even have a ground where they can be able to reach out to some of the political leaders in terms of sharing their own issues, in terms of sharing their own perspective. So I think if we want them to be at the higher table, we need to promote inclusion of these particular people. Let them show them that they really have they have a quota to contribute in addressing the impact of climate change, which is when we are going to go with Dr. Mina's input of strengthening their capacity, identifying the issues, strengthening their capacity, engaging them so that they can be able to amplify and voice out some of their major issues across their communities. This is what will give them an avenue to be at the decision-making tables to make their own contributions. Thank you, and over.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was quite insightful. And our follow-up question on that was, what are some of the ways, in your own perspective, somehow we have given an answer to that, but maybe if you have anything more to say about that, what steps can be taken to ensure that these youth are not only in the decision-making discussions, because you've talked about ELCOI. We have many platforms that youth engagements are needed, but if they're implemented is another question. So is there a way to ensure that some of these youth are given leadership roles and their perspectives are heard and acted upon? So maybe just a brief answer on that. So maybe Dr. Mina, you can go first. So how can we ensure that these youth are given leadership roles and their perspectives are heard, but not only heard, but they're also acted upon?
Okay, so first and foremost, now you know that youth now they have been empowered, they have been strengthened, and they're already on the table. So how do you make them heard? They themselves have to make the contribution. You cannot hear a silent person. So they have to speak out. They have to amplify their voices. They have to share what is bothering them concerning the environment and how they hope to address it as an example, and then apply those indigenous knowledge matched with the knowledge gained. So how to make them heard is first of all to get them to speak. So they should know that they are now representing their constituencies, so they must speak. And by speaking, definitely we're working with policy makers and others who are going to listen to know what exactly the peculiarities are, and then they should be able to take action from there. But there is no hearing without somebody speaking. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was precise and to the point. Crispin, if you have something to say on that.
Thank you once more for this question. So for me, I think the role is too many, because if they who face suffers the really cause of climate crisis. So their knowledge of the environmental, whether the traditional way is worth a price, because they are busy on the really causes of certain climatic crises. For example, flood, landslide, heavy rains, high water levels, that one and so on. So, and which can be a suitable solution to this scourge. They must be taken into consideration and integrated by local, national, and global decision maker as really a for solution. That's one for a few ways can I answer for this. So over is to you, yeah.
Thank you. Ismail?
Thank you so much, Valentine. From my own perspective, I think issue of not only including them in decision-making process, but giving leadership roles and their perspective heard and acted upon. I think it's a contextual issue. Each of the contexts have their own contending issues regarding youth inclusiveness in policy and decision-making processes. So I think we need to leverage on existing structures such as youth platforms and youth movements to carry out campaign and activisms through the capacity strengthening of the youth that was actually carried upon. This, I think, can go a long way in ensuring young people have a seat in some of the policy and decision-making processes so that they can be able to contribute their quota and well represent the youth to discuss some of the major issues that is affecting the youth across their communities. So most at times when we look at this particular issue is that the problem of the youth are the youth. The reason is that most of the people that are already, that have the resources, they have the capability to maybe apply or buy some of the tickets for them to contest to a particular positions. Let me give an example with Nigeria. For young persons to go and contest, for him to be in to look for a particular seat during the electioneering period, I think it's going to be more expensive for him. So someone will think, for me to go and use these huge resources for me to contest for a particular seat, is better for me to go into a business or further my education or something else. Aside from that, there are instances whereby you can contest to have the chance for you to be elected. Unfortunately, you don't have the resources. Some of the other young people will be supporting the other people so that they can be able to get something to cater for their own need. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Very insightful take-home points. So our next question is, Dr. Mina mentioned about what these indigenous youth and communities are. They have their own way of maybe preventing or the catastrophic changes. When there are floods, they have their own way of stopping that. So the question is around that. What role do traditional indigenous knowledge systems and practices play in finding sustainable solutions to climate change? And how can these be integrated into the mainstream climate action efforts? So, Dr. Mina, you can go first on that.
Okay, I didn't quite get the last comment. What was the last line of the comment?
Can I read out the whole thing?
Please.
So, sure. So the question is, what role do traditional indigenous knowledge systems and practices play in finding sustainable solutions to climate change? And how can these be integrated into mainstream climate action efforts?
Okay, so what role is it? So first of all, we acknowledge that the indigenous practices exist, and so far they have survived the pain of climate change in different forms. Means they have done something about it. So as young people, you see that during times like in any climate crisis, you see them coming together. If it is in terms of flood, you see that at some point you see them moving to drier land, dry lands, higher level grounds. You see them trying to plant at the shore. Shoreline protection is key. You see that the shoreline protection is their only two way. You see that they all these local measures have led them to be resilient to a lot of the impacts of climate change. What you bring to the picture are current trends and other best practices from global perspective. I will now bring it to see if their local context can, benefit from those learnings from the global level, as to how things can be done in a more sustainable manner. So their knowledge is not thrown away. Their knowledge rather now is just simply refined, to enhance their to reduce their vulnerability, enhance their adaptation, and also promote coping mechanisms. So these are the kind of things that happen when you mainstream their knowledge vis-a-vis matching it with the global best practices, because you're thinking globally and applying global best practices, but to a local situation. So for me, there are indigenous actions such as the local prone issues, protection issues, shoreline protection issues. Talk about waste management. How do they manage their waste? How do they separate? How do they incinerate where necessary? How do they do? And part of why we are saying we're improving their quality of service and practice is that, for example, they know that they some of them, the waterways, where we mostly come from in this part of the world, the waterways are used as dump wasting locations. And now we're coming back to tell them, no, you don't need to use your waterways as dump. First of all, some of this waste now can be turned into wealth. A lot of sea waste are now turned into a lot of waste we see now turned into wealth. Seaweeds now are turned into accessories. You know that I wish I could show you pictures of accessories that have been made from seaweed, things like water hyacinth that flood, that destroy our waterways. We have turned that water hyacinth into a lot of things, from clothes to furniture to accessories. Now, what they do locally is they find a way to pack this and then dump it somewhere, and then the contractors also come and do same. So you discover that at that point, we are coming to say, yes, we have seen this thing, and yes, you are trying to ensure that it does not clog and destroy your waterways. But these are other ways we can also utilize this thing. So we match their indigenous knowledge, with the global best practices, and so far it has helped to improve. Then, in terms of dialogue, there are cultural practices that they have that are custom to them. So those cultural practices, we don't disrupt those cultural practices. We respect those cultural practices to promote inclusion. So, for example, yeah, there are some cultural practices that don't recognize women's participation in environmental protection. So part of what we do is we bring in the idea that there should be inclusion across gender issues. If women don't support you, the men, in promoting best practice in the environment, we will still face the same issues, because during a flood, the women and our children are most vulnerable in a lot of ways. The men can decide to run the men. So when you look at all these things, you see that we are bringing in their indigenous thoughts, yes, but we are working with them to refining and seeing better ways they can apply it to promote environmental sustainability.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was very profound. Crispin?
Yeah, thank very much for this question. So, indigenous people had their own practice, their own strategical to struggle against climate change. So, for example, I can take an example for my country, DRC. So, in some territory, for example, Kabare territory, young indigenous people in the Kauzi-Biega Park who lives into Kauzi-Biega Park had to develop tactics with houses with mud their own cover to protect their shelters during heavy intense rain. So, but although they had to dig traditional canals serving as water draining that could be used to water their flood, and it was successful. That was their own method and practical to fight against climate change. Thank for this.
Thank you, Crispin. Ismail?
Thank you so much, Valentine. Actually, I think Indigenous people play a vital role in addressing the impact of climate change across their various communities in the aspect of protection, environmental sustainability, and restoration of the ecosystem. I think from the inception, I speaks around ethical extensionisms, whereby man is so attached. Man is not only attached to his environment because of his livelihood and source of income as well, is also attached to his environment in the aspect of his culture and his own religions. Man has been living with his community and the ecosystem for quite a number of years. So actually, through their roles, there are other communities, most especially in the part of Nigeria, whereby some people are even attached to wild animals, which help in forest conservations of animals. There are locations where you cannot be able to kill a snake. There are other locations where human beings are even attached to some of the wild animals in the bush. So this is a clear indication of our conservations of our plant and other forest resources and our ecosystem, whereby for us to ensure a proper sustainability of whatever is happening. There are other communities whereby you can find a river where people used to go there and worship the river, or for their other cultural practices or other activities, which make it very, very surrounded, and is going to be well taken care of for more sustainability for other generations to be able to come and have access to these particular places. And the indigenous people have a better solutions that they normally practices based on their own belief and their own ideology and perspective. And most of the times, whatever they try to do what suit their interest and what address their needs and priorities. In leaving them out of our solutions, we can bring a solution that is more advanced technological solutions, but it's not what they are needing or what they are demanding, and is going to cost a very huge resources. I think the indigenous people can help us in thinking locally and act globally. Thank you, and over.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Key takeout from Ismail is they can help us think globally and act. Think locally and act globally. Thank you for that. Our next question is around, some of you have mentioned what they've seen being done or what they're part of being done. So we want you to share with our participants and everyone who is tuned in some of the successful examples of indigenous-led climate action initiatives that have effectively empowered and engaged the indigenous youth. Dr. Mina.
Okay, so for us now, I'm going to critically highlight that we have youths who have been in what they call the what will I call it, the IDP camps, and then we have youths who are in communities. Mind you, we also have youths who are in host schools that are in communities as well. So you have in-school youths, out-of-school youths, and then the IDP camp youths in the IDP camp. Their approaches are different. For the in-school youths, if the question is directed at highlighting some of the change stories, sustainability stories. Am I correct? Am I correct?
Sorry, the question is?
Yes, the question, Valentine, is about identifying those best
Yeah.
practice case studies, right?
Yes.
Okay, so there are some peculiar to them. For example, there are some in-school youths we have at the local communities. They have been able to they were able to come together in terms of waste management, and they have been able to convert a lot of the waste in their locality through, after separation. They were taught to separate, and after separation, they have been able to identify ways in which to convert those plastic waste into floor tiles, into different products, and that has been a very strategic case study for us. They've been able to produce those things at the local level. They've been able to go into smart agriculture that's environmentally friendly at their local level, and then they've been able to produce very interesting crops, rare crops, based on the models that they're applying. So in-school youth also have their own contribution to different innovative case studies that has helped promote environmental sustainability. And And then we have at the local level too, we have what we call reusable pad. Some reusable pad that are trained to make reusable pad from local materials as well as from other materials, and that has helped a lot of girls, also in the locality. So these are some few case studies emanating from the in-school youth in rural areas, indigenous youth that are in rural areas based in school. Then for those in the IDP camps who are mostly on the move, our IDP camp youths are often on the move, because if there are flood situations or crisis or issues around conflicts, they are made to move most of the time. So in that state of mobility, they're able to find out what could be the best way to address these issues in terms of their migration. So based on that, they have been able to develop also some tools. They have been able to develop some resilient tools, like I said, that has helped them in the course of their movement, and that readiness, that preparedness, that disaster preparedness has really been a very, very core part of their existence, which was not totally existing before, because they were applying it at lower level. But now you see that they've been able to be empowered. So that level of disaster preparedness is a lot better than it was before. So you see them that are doing things around their shoreline protection, are doing things around floodplains, are doing things around cultural advocacy, around cultural practices. There are some cultural practices that also contribute to environmental destruction, such as continuous forestation and deforestation. So now those practices are also being addressed through advocacy, and you are seeing that there's a lot in terms of, if you cannot kill one and plant two, then reduce deforestation so that it will not affect our vulnerability to climate change. So all this comes into play, as well as even those that are out of school, the core indigenous community people, they have also put together themselves into networks and collaboration groups, to address different environmental issues. So there are several case studies that are emanating from these young people, and you can see that there's a bridge that we can fill. There's a gap that we can fill by collaborating and continuously partnering with them. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Mino. Crispin? Crispin, are you with us? Okay, Ismail, maybe you can go. You can.
There are indigenous way of addressing climate solutions, which we were able to carry out from my own end. There is a recent project we carry out, which is called PPN, Plant, Protect, and Nurture. So at the inception of the project, we normally go out to carry out tree plantations campaign across rural communities, whereby at the end of the day, when we come to check on those trees, we'll come and find out that most of the trees we planted are no more in existence. Either it was cutted by animals, or either the people in the community cutted some of the trees we planted across those communities. So through our engagement with the rural communities, we are able to engage in series of advocacy despite our first engagement with the community for community buy-in and community entry at the inception of the project. We further engage with some of the community leaders and community members. Then we come up with the concept of why not giving those trees to the people in the community so that we can support them in doing the plantations. By so doing, we are able to address a lot of issues regarding climate change through tree planting activities. Furthermore, we also have an activity on flooding. The recent flooding that happens in Nigeria has brought a devastating impact across most of the locations in terms of their farm harvest and many more. So we are able to engage with the community members, whereby most of the community members we have a plan. We have a plan as a mitigation measures and mitigation plan, which we normally executed. 2 months to the rainy season, we normally engage the rural community people to carry out drainage evacuations across their communities, which is part of our localizations and way of engaging the community that are affected. If they are the one that carry out the evacuations of the drainage basins, they will not allow any person to dump waste across the waterways and many more. These are some of the initiatives we are able to carry out and engage with the rural communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ismail. So our next question is around what are some of the unique challenges that are faced by these indigenous youth in their effort to combat climate change? Dr. Mina.
So what are the unique challenges? Now, we have issues around cultural bias, economic issues, social issues. We have intellectual issues. We have a lot of things that they face in terms of cultural bias. There's some things that they may want to do, but you say, okay, the women are not allowed or the girls are not allowed. So you see a lot of things a lot of opinion people experience is it's a male-driven process. Anything about advocacy, climate change, confrontation are all male-driven. So we need to overcome the cultural bias. And then the indigenous youth in a lot of places, they're the ones directly affected by the oil pollution. So loss and damage issues, they need to have their skills built in how to overcome, these matters. You have loss and damage issues that they need to deal with. So this is a very strong peculiar challenge that they face, because they're the host communities to these oil companies, and these oil companies for the past 50 years have destroyed their host communities and left them with little or no choice, in terms of livelihood options. So this is just the era where we are building up livelihood options. And even if we're bringing in AI, AI, not everybody can do AI. Somebody has to talk about how does the food come on the tables. I spent, no problem, she'll give you some. I spent the whole of today discussing how we can set up smart agricultural farms. Just a few minutes before we started the session, we'll finish the field work on how we can start smart agricultural farms in 6 locations. So you can imagine that these soils that have been destroyed and polluted give youth very little chance to think of agriculture in a very big way until this cleaning is done. The cleanup is completely done, remediation is done. You understand? So those are particular challenges. And then we talk about the challenge in terms of economic viability of whatever they want to get involved in, educational opportunities. These youth face a lot of particular challenges. And there's a social construct around how they are expected to live and how they interact. All these things are peculiar to the young people. So if we're able to identify these peculiar challenges and bridge this gap either through information, education, or communication, I am very sure that a lot of these youths will come out to be, leaders in decision making and advocacy positions where they can actually change a lot of things for the better. From the policy level, we train them on policy advocacy, so they're able to tell their local constituency heads, their assemblymen, and all those people about the challenges that they face and how they want them to take certain policy driven action. So these are some of the things that go on at the local level, because this oil pollution that has taken place in their local lands affects them in terms of the higher impact of climate change on them. Their exposure level is very high, and already they have to deal with both the man-made pollution and the environmental or natural pollution and natural disasters. So it's a lot on this category of people, and it is believed that through this smart cities, smart agriculture, smart opportunities, sustainability discussions and conversations, they're able to get ideas on how to promote better living for communities.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Mina. Ismail?
To add more, some of the major challenges that exist to the indigenous people across the locations while we are carrying out the activity, I can say we have gender inequality. There are particular decisions that favor people from a particular gender. Let's assume in terms of accessing opportunities and many more, which make people across some of the communities for them to be not to be unhappy. Then we have issue of political inequality. Young people don't have the capacity or have the opportunity for them to be at the decision-making table where they can contribute their quota in the processes and also come up with more youth-friendly decisions and more youth-friendly laws. In terms of laws, there are a certain group of people in terms of maybe age or particularity that are being favored in terms of decision-making processes. Then we also have economic inequality. There are other people that I think Dr. Mina have already shed more light on the economic inequality. We have issues around inequality of access. There are particular people that doesn't have access to some of the major opportunity in terms of healthcare centers, in terms of educations, which is why they are already in the dark. They don't know how they can be able to engage with decision makers in addressing these solutions and coming up with more friendly solutions. They don't even know how they can even carry out their complaint, how they can engage in advocacy, how can they make an informed decisions, and many more. Then lastly, we have inequality of opportunities. The number of unemployment rate is actually growing by the day. There are certain issue of maybe tribe, culture, or particular group of people that are more prioritized than others. This is a very huge inequality that is actually affecting the decision-making process and the indigenous communities at large. So I think aside that, we have issue of injustice, we have issue of corruption, we have issue of ignorance, and many more. At times, some of the indigenous people doesn't take the issue of climate change as their priority. They didn't even take it at their interest, while others know what they are doing have an effect to the environment, but they still do it because they take the hard way as the only way for them to survive. Thank you. Valentina, you are talking while you are muted.
Okay, sorry. Thank you. I think I've been engrossed in taking notes of what both of you have talked about. Those are really amazing points for us to learn from. And maybe a follow-up question on that. How can we ensure that Indigenous youth have access to the necessary tools and technologies to effectively advocate for climate action and environmental injustices? Dr. Amina?
We have to take it to them. We have to take it to them. We have to take the information to them. We have to take education to them. We have to, look at how can they promote conservation of their environment. Somebody's making a comment on that, but I think we'll come to that. We have to look at their practices at the local level and say, okay, these are these things, we're strengthening these practices, we're enriching it with this additional, going by what is going on now. No human can work in isolation. Nobody can be alone and say, okay, they can do everything on their own. It's a joint effort. There needs to be more networking, more collaboration. We need to go out there and reach out to those young people and build their capacity and support them in understanding knowledge transfer, indigenous knowledge transfer, vis-a-vis also global best practices, knowledge transfer for local action. It needs to be at the fore of what you are doing. So a lot of the things that need to change will begin from conversations to communicating best ideas from the local level and also from the global level. And I think that will provide us with some foundational information that will help them promote the environment sustainably and also increase and improve on their conservation processes.
Thank you. Ismail?
Oh, apologies, I have been talking while I was muted as Valentina. Okay, please, can you come again? I think I missed your question at some point.
Okay, so it is a follow-up on the previous question. So how can we ensure that these Indigenous youth have access to necessary tools and technologies to effectively advocate for climate action and environmental justices?
Okay, I think I'll provide access, provision of access, where they can have access in terms of opportunities, where they can know the technical know-how. There are other rural communities that are indigenous people are living there, but they don't have access to the internet connections, which is even making it more difficult for them to access some of the major informations. While there are other scenarios of people that have the technological resources, but they don't have the technical know-how of how they can make use of this particular technological tool to address their particular issue or to raise concern or to raise awareness. Then issue of lack of empowerment. I think this is a high time for us to engage the government to empower those rural communities for them to have access to the basic needs of life. And we need to make them understand and realize to know that climate issue is a global issue and it's a thing of concern that they need to take an action. And it's, I think the earth is what we all have as a common. So I think addressing the impact of climate change is not a work of one person, but the work of everybody, for us to ensure we mitigate some of the climate impact across our communities and societies. So I think through this major thing, we are able to see how we can engage the government. Through the empowerment, not only the government, individual, we have our individual business people and many more. So through the empowerment process, we can think of empowering them on advocacy skills, digital advocacy, fiscal advocacy, and many more, so that they can be well equipped and more knowledgeable on knowing how they can address and how they can raise concern. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Our next question is, I think we've touched on it, the intersection of other SDGs with maybe the SDG 13 climate action. And mostly we talk about creating awareness as the major, and you have mentioned severally on that creating awareness, making these people understand, or the indigenous communities understand that there's a problem and maybe this is how we can solve it. So from your own perspective, just in short, because I think you've mentioned it already, what role can education play in empowering these indigenous youth to become climate activists and leaders in their communities? Dr. Mina.
Ha ha ha. Education is everything. Okay, let me not be too ambitious with only education. I give percentages to a lot of other things, but for UNESCO to sit down and dedicate over 90% of their climate action plan to education for sustainable development, it tells a lot. It tells a lot. UNESCO is dedicating a lot to promoting greening of education and promoting greening of homes. I mean, you cannot even run away from the fact that education is it. Who gives what you don't have? How do you promote best practices, environmental practice, and promoting sustainability without even understanding what to do? You understand? So the first thing is, do they have the appropriate knowledge transfer? I mean, UNESCO is at the fore of promoting green. For those who don't know, part of the transforming education process, which I'm sure everybody is aware of, I'm just trying to bring it to our remembrance, that we should even note that there is a process in place to promote greening of education. You see, that there's a process in place as part of the education for sustainable development to ensure that every young person has a green school to talk about, to ensure that, everybody is able to communicate, in the language that they best understand, that they can most take action on. So we are promoting community-led environmental activism, you understand, but matched with knowledge, matched with proper education in line with the global practices, especially the templates at UNESCO, who is the education domiciliary organization. So they are telling us that we need to look beyond just a mainstream education. We now need to look at educating for sustainable development. We now need to be intentional about our educational processes. We now need to be intentional about promoting sustainability. So when you look at this kind of things, you see that yes, we are talking about indigenous processes, but with more capacity strengthening, with more knowledge transfer, with more opportunities at being a part of the education for sustainable development processes, they will not go wrong. They will be more empowered to stand at any UN General Assembly. They will be empowered to stand at any COP29. They will be empowered to stand and tell them we are indigenous people, we have indigenous issues, but we recognize that there are global practices that we can also learn from and come back to improve our community-led initiatives. So knowledge is power, like my university tag will say, and there is nothing we can do without appropriate knowledge. My people perish because of lack of knowledge, as the Bible will say. But so the important thing about getting things right is first of all making intentional steps to learning and knowing them. Knowing what to do helps any human being, be it the highest, be it the lowest. Your ability to know enables your ability to act. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mina. Ismail?
Thank you so much, Valentina, for these wonderful questions. I can say education is power. Education play a pivotal role in mitigating the impact of climate change. I would like to look at the aspect, the concept in the aspect of socialization. You know, education is a very great agent of socializations, aside from family, peer group, workplace, and many more. When we look at education in that concept, normally, an hour a child normally spend in home and at school, an hour he spent in school is quite much more than an hour he spent at home. So by so doing, I think that education has really impacted him a lot, whereby he can be able to understand and know the difference between the right and wrong, difference between white and black, and difference between how did climate change is an impact or is an effect to him and the environment at large. And this can equip him for him to know that let me sustain this environment and not only sustain it for myself, but for my future generations, for my late brothers, for my younger ones, and many more. So I think an educations play a role in creating awareness in terms of engagement and strengthening the capacity of young people at a teenage age. I can say there is one slogan we normally do when carrying out sensitizations to primary school children. We normally say, catch them young. Catch them young, as a way of catching them young for them to know the impact of the climate change so that they can have the idea of sustainability, environmental adaptations, and other environmental mitigation measures before they even grow. They can know how to manage their waste, how can they keep their environment clean, how can they contribute their quota. And this is a very high time for them to know and understand. We need to stop talking around issue of corporate responsibility. We need to start looking at individual responsibility. Without the educations and knowledge, we don't have the capacity to know all these things. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So the summary of that is knowledge is power, and we cannot do 99% of these without education. So education is really key in this aspect. So our next point of discussion will be around collaborations. So how can we foster collaborations and partnerships between the indigenous youth organizations and non-indigenous allies to create a more inclusive and effective climate action movement? Dr. Mina?
Okay, so how do we enhance collaboration? There are grassroots level collaboration, state level collaboration, national level, international level collaboration. So whichever one, the issue is that how do you work with others? Try to confirm the fact that no one can work in isolation. So how do you work with, at the grassroots level, there's what we call mobilizing communities. So we mobilize them to be able to take on some community-led initiatives and community-led actions. So collaborations can take place at that grassroots. I believe we're talking about collaboration in it. So collaboration can take place at that level. Then at the state level too, that collaborations in interministerial, inter-youth, different factions of the youth groups can also collaborate in carrying out different activities. Then at the national level, see, we are not joking when we hear that Goal 17 is about collaboration. So it is a mandatory expectation that collaboration is part of our processes. It's mainstream into our process because you see that Goal 17 clearly tells you partnership for the goals. For you to achieve anything, you want to achieve climate action, you have to collaborate. You want to achieve Goal 1, which is all the different goals from the first one to the 17th goal, all have hinge on collaboration. So there are many levels of collaboration. There can be transdisciplinary collaboration, interministerial collaboration, but all these youths, the indigenous youth need to come out and meet other. Every youth, as a matter of fact, is from a community, a locality. So in a sense, we are all indigenous youth in ourselves being affected by different impacts at our local level. The only difference is people move on. So you can see that people move to different areas, locales, and all that, and bear the name also urban youth. But you can see that at some point you cannot be disassociated from your local beginning, So we need to see that collaboration is a must and needs to be maintained in all our participation for higher impact and, for more sustainability.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Ismail, your pointers on that?
Thank you so much. From my own end, I think for us to enhance proper collaborations, we need to look at our own visions, our own goal, and our own objectives and missions while looking at the issue around collaborations. Assuming I'm an organization working toward addressing the impact of climate change, I think there is no any relevance of collaborating with an organizations that are working towards maybe issue of gender equality, because our concept is quite different, but at some instances, the issue of gender inequality can come and play part in the aspect of climate change. So we need to map and know whom and who are we going to collaborate with. We should avoid working in silos. We should always be open up for more collaborations. There is a saying that if you want to go fast, go along. If you want to go far, go together. That is why collaboration is actually very important. And for us to achieve a bigger aim and objectives, we need to strengthen our collaborations capacity. We need to effectively map our stakeholders in carrying out an activity for us to know some of their major interests, stakeholders mapping for us to identify their interests. What do they have interest in? What didn't they have interest in? We should actually pay more attention in carrying out our assessment across some of the baseline assessment for us to know what existing organizations or what existing structures do we have, what policies do we have on ground, who does what, who does what, and who does that, etc., etc. So I think if you can leverage on that, it's going to yield more output and more result. And through engagement, proper engagement of the youth and participations through collaborations and awareness creations, it can really create a very important role in ensuring effective collaborations across the communities, because there are instances whereby you may end up trying to collaborate or you may end up trying to address a cause, but the Nigerian politicians are actually smart. They can just start looking after you. What are you doing? This one is just a graduate. He don't have any work. So let's just go and hire him for him to be our political ally. The moment they employ you as their political ally, you cannot look at them and raise any concern to them because you are already together with them. So that is the impact of collaboration. In case if someone among you was recruited by a politician, then the other people can still raise the cause and call their attentions for concern. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ismail and Dr. Mina, for that. So over these discussions, I think we've mentioned about there's a lot of relations between the indigenous communities and the climate injustices. Dr. Mina mentioned about the loss and damage aspect. So our next question is the intersectionality of these three things. So what strategies can be implemented to address the intersectionality of indigenous rights, climate justice, and youth empowerment? So we can start with Dr. Mina.
Okay, indigenous rights, climate justice, and youth empowerment. You see, a lot of the young people do not know. They do not know that they can address those issues through climate policy and then advocacy for best practices in climate policy. So that is exactly what we are supposed to do. So in order to ensure that their rights, what a key thing that we do is to ensure that these people are aware that advocacy, through what I call legislative advocacy, can also change their situation and also promote their rights, at a higher level. So we build their capacity of what we call legislative advocacy. And then today we have been able to work with these young people to pass a lot of bills. You see, a lot of bills have been passed, and today those bills are doing a lot in terms of promoting structured practices. What I mean, institutionalized practices better that way. So people know that if they destroy the environment, they have a price to pay. If they destroy the environment and the youth, and when you destroy the environment and you don't pay that price, it's a human right violation, having to subject young people to so much pain. So the young people are able to understand, climate action at the level of legislative advocacy. They have been able to know that they can meet their House of Representatives, they can meet their Senate, they can meet their different members, they can work with civil society to promote best practices in climate advocacy. And also, they are seeing that in doing this, of course, their rights are being promoted because they go hand in hand. Where there's injustice, climate injustice, you see that people are affected. Where there's loss and damage, people are affected. And the only way to make sure that this comes to an end is to mainstream the power of advocacy at the legislative level, to ensuring that we come up with bills and policies that will enhance best environmental practices. So these are how we strengthen them with this information, they carry out these processes, and then you see that certain bills are passed, and then implementation comes in as another level. But let it be that there are policies and the legislation in place to promoting the rights of human. Now you are aware that the United Nations General Assembly has already promoted the rights, environmental protection or clean air as an environmental right. So I mean, as a human right. So you can imagine we need to amplify this scenario and make sure more people know about this and the impacts of not obeying this law. So that is one of the ways we have the intersection, to match. They are all linked in one way or another. You cannot dissociate climate, human rights from the strengthening of these people, the young people, and you cannot do that also. You need to look at it more holistically. And so I'm happy about this question because it brings together, it ties everything up together, and it tells us that one can't do without the other. We need to look at things more holistically, and we'll be able to get a lot of knowledge. And I don't believe in youth not being employed. It's not fair. It's an injustice for youth not to be employed. Now I can imagine that youth can be self-employed. Youth can be employed, but I also believe that youth need to be made to be employable, especially in the green sector. And that is one of the things that was promoted in COP28. And so we should look at green skills for young people to promoting best practices and improving their human rights.
Thank you, Dr. Mina. Ismail?
So much actually for bringing these questions. I think the questions is actually a little bit vague. I couldn't even pick the questions entirely. Please, can you come again?
So the question is around, we've talked about the indigenous communities who in turn are facing like the climate injustices. So the question is around what strategies can be implemented to address the intersectionality of indigenous rights, climate justice, and youth empowerment. So we have all these things together affecting the indigenous youth. So what can we do maybe to bring out solutions around that area?
Okay, thank you so much. Actually, from my own point of view, I think for us to address the intersectionality in the aspect of empowerment, climate justice, and issue around okay, it's fine. So actually, from my own point of view, as I earlier stated, for us to address these key issues, we need to look at how we can engage with some of the decision-making body in coming up with policies that address in terms of ethics and policies. How can we empower young people in terms of ethics, in terms of how they do things, and how can we be able to address some of the social injustice and social inequalities. When we look at the issue of intersectionality, I would like to bring a brief examples regarding the entire injustice that happen in the course of climate change. When we look at our issue around the global north and global south, there are huge injustices that actually exist between these two regions. Between the north and the south, we actually classify the north as rich while the south are poor. So in this aspect, most of the northern countries are more developed, are more advanced in terms of technological resources and many more. While when we look at the global south, we Nigerians and Africa entirely, I think we are less developed in terms of technological, in terms of emissions contributing to the global emissions, and many more, we actually contribute less. And there is a saying in climate change that people that contribute less, they are the ones that suffer more of the impact than those that contribute more. And sometimes in terms of decisions, in terms of empowerment, the reason why I am bringing this on board is we need to amplify not only to our Nigerian government, but to some of the global northern countries, oil sectors, big industries, for them to create an opportunity for younger people and younger generations in building community resilience, how we can come up with policies that we can be, in terms of carbon taxing, how can we tax them in terms of what they do, our industries, how can we ensure proper and greenwashing for them to ensure whatever they are doing are more of sustainable. We need to start looking at degenerative economic than degenerative economic, an economic that consider our environment in terms of sustainability, not only an economy that actually look after profit. They don't care about our environment, how we are going to be. So we need to also look around this. We need to tackle issue of gender, race, and inequalities, and address overlapping social injustices, inclusion, economic, and support community-driven approaches for us to be more sustainable and for us to be resilient. We need to build the resilience of our people, for them to be empowered, for them to know how they can address some of the major issues. I think these are some of the major things, and these are key. And this kind of inequalities does not only exist between the global North and global South, it also exists between the rich and the poor. Most importantly, the recent 2023 flood that took place, I think, in Nigeria, when you look at some of the communities, it mostly affected the poor people in terms of their farmland, in terms of their houses, and many more. While the rich, they already prefer their place where they are living, more equitable, more sustainable, and they already have their own mitigations plan across these locations. And I think we need to also engage with some of the government and stakeholders to come up with our risk mitigations plan on how we can address some of the major issues. And we need to also look at our vulnerability. What are some of our major vulnerabilities across locations, and how can we be able to address some of the major vulnerabilities? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ismail. This has really been a very insightful session. I hope everyone is learning a lot, not even something. I hope you're taking notes. You can, just a reminder that you can put your questions on the chat. I don't see a Q&A tab, so you can drop your questions on the chat if you have any, because we're moving towards the end of this, so we can have your questions answered. To wrap up the panel discussions, so to our panelists, what message or advice would you like to leave with the Indigenous youth as they step into the forefront of climate activism and work towards a sustainable future for their communities and the planet? Dr. Mina.
Collaborate. Learn, unlearn, relearn. Never get tired of learning new ways of doing old things, and never get tired of, sharing your thoughts, and always look inwards. What can we do to best protect our environment? Knowledge is power. I keep repeating it. And your continuous engagement and your continuous collaborations will enhance your local practice. So this is an era of knowledge exchange and knowledge transfer. So we need to bear that in mind very strongly. Don't put that on the floor. We need to bear that in mind very strongly. In order to deliver. So I'm so excited to hear Indigenous young people being intentional about learning to promote environmental sustainability. And I'm all looking forward to working with as many young people to see how this can happen.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mina. So collaborate, and learn. Ismail?
Thank you so much. I was even thinking if we can have 1 hour for us to further discuss an issue around climate change, because it's actually a global issue. And I'm happy to connect with other people from other parts of the country. Most importantly, Dr. Mina Ogbanga from Nigeria as well. I'm also from Nigeria. It's my pleasure to connect with you. I think my major call to actions to the entire indigenous people and young people across the globe is we need to engage in volunteerisms. Most at times, young people normally engage in activities that are going to receive a token at the end of the engagement or any activity. Let's learn to volunteer to address a particular cause. We need to encourage youth engagement and youth participations in activity that influence policies and decision-making processes across our communities. Then we need to also strengthen our capacity through research, online course, and any digital platform as well, collaborate as we are advocating for the climate change. Then the last thing is, let's always act, no matter how little it is. It's not about mouth-watering, coming up with decisions. The small solutions we have, it can address a bigger issue. But when we keep it to ourselves, the issue can keep growing and escalate to create more harm. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. This has been a very, very insightful conversation, especially for me. I hope for everyone else. I hope everyone was taking notes on all these discussions. So the next bit, I think we are going to get into the Q&A session. I don't know. I think I am losing charts or something. So, because I had seen previous questions, but the only question I can see now is from Meshach. So he says, hello, my question is how to manage with borders and geopolitical challenges in youth organizations collaboration. So how can individuals manage the issue of borders and geopolitical challenges in their organizational collaborations? So maybe Dr. Amina and then Ismail, you can, or anyone who is ready to answer that.
You're talking about how to manage in the collaborations at the borders.
Yeah.
Okay, that is transnational collaborations. You know, borderline, they have their peculiar challenges, with all the attendant issues. Borderline, but whichever borderlines they come from, we can still work with the youth at the shores, borderlines to also see how we can promote indigenous-led climate activities and actions. So I think one of the things that can happen is that at those border levels, some are affected by conflict, others are not affected by conflict, but you can promote a lot of interaction between countries at the borders just by promoting dialogue between and amongst them. Is one area that has worked very well. Promoting dialogue, understanding transboundary relationship, and then seeing how we can promote regional cooperation at different levels. So for me, the same principle of collaboration can work whether it is at the boundary level or whether it is at the internally local level. So we need to look inwards, and then we can see that can work. Today we have the ACTFA, and they're also a good we have the regional plans like the African Union. They're all supporting regional and borderline collaboration. So we can explore a lot of opportunities there.
Thank you, Dr. Amina. So there is a question for Ismail from Janet. Sorry, I hope Meshach, your question has been answered. Then
although I have something
you have a point on that. Okay.
To shed more light on that, even though Dr. Mina has already shared her own idea. Okay, from my own end, I think there are, when we look at collaborations between transnational or different geopolitical zones, we all have our maybe laws, we have our policies, and many more. So sometimes for somebody to collaborate with other organizations across other locations, the policies might vary from the initial policies you have in your own territory or in your own area. So we need to look at some of the major policies. We need to conduct our SWOT analysis to know our strengths, what are our weaknesses, our opportunity, what are some of the major threats, and how can we be able to address these particular issues. Then we need to ensure a proper MOU, memorandum of understanding between the two parties, maybe in terms of, let's assume, issue of currency disbursement, issue of recruitment, and many more, issue of carrying out the activity. We need to all sit together, collaborate, and share idea to discuss on how we can go with the idea and execute the collaborations across the two organizations. Thank you, and over.
Okay, sorry. Thank you, Ismail. So we have a question from Janet for Ismail. How have you ensured the success of Indigenous-led climate actions of your groups, and how do you measure the success of those actions? That's a question from Janet to Ismail.
Okay, thank you so much, Janet, for asking me this question. How have you ensured the success of Indigenous-led climate actions of your group, and how do you measure success of those actions? So when you look at how I ensure the success of the Indigenous-led climate actions of my group is through our continuous engagement and informing the Indigenous people about the cause. You know, sometimes there is a saying that leaders are not born, leaders are made. Sometimes your actions can drive participation. When you are doing something, people might think you don't have a job, you don't know what you are doing. That is the reason why you are doing. Along the line, they may tend to understand what you are doing has a greater meaning and has a greater cause and has a greater impact to the community entirely. The community people can tend to join you. That is why I usually made mention of stakeholders engagement and stakeholder mapping. Sometimes while carrying out the stakeholder engagement or stakeholders mapping, we need to pay much more attention to identify their interest. You may come up with a project or an idea, but the community will not give you go ahead and give you more green light for you to carry out the activity. But along the line, you may tend to understand what are some of their major interests. There are instances where you are carrying out an activity, you will find out that the community participation is actually low. You may get to find out that maybe it's low because you did not engage any member of the community to be part of the activity. So by so doing, you are going to achieve a very greater impact across the particular issue. So I don't know if this has answered your question or you need more explanation for me to continue.
Well, let's hope it has answered the questions.
Okay, should I continue?
Sorry?
Should I continue?
Oh, you have something else to say?
Yes, I have something else to say if she says she's not
Sure.
clear with the so
No,
I think
okay.
and sometimes when you find out their interest, you should always keep them informed. When you do anything, try and keep them informed of what is the success of the activity. So issue of success, you know, in project management and project cycle, we all have our different definition of success. Some people take success and it depends with the kind of project. Some of the project outcomes, it cannot be measured. It takes a number of years before you can see some of the outcomes, which are part of what your success stories and some of your successes. So assuming you plant a tree, I plant 100 trees. When I went around after 3 or 4 months, I find out that I got 95 trees. It's a success to me. Or I go around after a year or after 2 weeks, a year, 2 years, I find out that all these trees has already grown to maturity. It's also a success to me. I can even share it as a success story. I can document it as a success story. So success might differ based on understanding, based on project, and based on context. Thank you.
Thank you, Ismail. Janet says thank you. So I believe it has answered the question. Thank you, Michael Yin. And then, do you have any other questions? You can also raise your hand and we can give you a chance to ask your questions. Because I think what was in the chat, I have already gone through that. So, okay, it's been a really amazing session. I have learned a lot personally, and I think for everyone out there who has been tuning in and everyone who is here, we've been able to have an understanding of what Indigenous communities, who are these people, the challenges they are facing, what we can do to help them be out there. And I think the major pointers that I took is the call to action. Collaboration is key for everyone, and especially the indigenous youth. So we need to come together, put our efforts together, work together for the common good. We also need to focus on learning, educate ourselves in the space that we are in, all these aspects, what we can do, and then implement that. And there was also a mention on volunteering. So let's engage in volunteering for a good cause, because we are doing all these for our planet where we are living. So let's spare a bit of time and do something for a good cause. Let's encourage youth participation in these meaningful conversation and ventures, and in the long run to ensure that all of us are part of the impact. And we've been told, let's act. And I also normally say this: every little thing that you do, you can start from your home area. Teach your family members, teach your friends, teach your cousins, teach your parents. If everyone does that, then at the end of the day, all these cumulatively, we'll be able to see a change in this space that we are in. So if I don't know if our panelists have anything else to say as we close up. So Dr. Mina, maybe you can say something, and then Ismail.
I think I've had a fantastic day. I want to thank everybody, those that listen. I want to, I'm excited about doing a lot more with people. Maybe what I would do is also to put in my, I'm trying to see if I can put in my LinkedIn details so you can all connect. I'll be happy to have you all connect, and then let's see how we can interact further. But I think the journey towards achieving climate action and promoting environmental sustainability, it's just started. We have a lot we can do and we have a lot we can achieve, but nobody can work alone. It has to be everybody working together. So let's all plan to work together at every point in time to seeing how we can move indigenous knowledge and also marry it with global best practices for a successful outcome in the environmental sector. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mina. Ismail?
Thank you so much. I think from my own end, I have nothing to actually say than appreciations and call the attention of young people, as we are the people that have the energy, we have the capacity, we have the access, and many more for us to drive this change. We are the driver of a change. We need to look at the climate change issue in a form of a vehicle. So we are the driver of the vehicle. You know, a vehicle cannot go without a driver. So the youth, we are the productive, we are the energetic people, and many more. Please, let's not stop learning. As Dr. Mina has rightly highlighted, we should always learn, relearn, and unlearn as well. We should always learn to connect with people from different angles, from different diaspora, for us to share experience and share learning. I get to find out that some of the major issues we have in Africa as a whole are a little bit peculiar from one country to another country. So through knowledge and information sharing, we can be able to address our cause. And as well, let's stop working in silos. Let's stop working in what? In silos. Let's always try to see how we can strengthen our level of collaborations and networking, no matter what. This can help us in advancing and addressing a bigger cause. Thank you so much and over. I look forward for more collaborations, more discussions, and more learning in the future. Thank you.
All right. So thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Mina. Thank you, Ismail. Thank you, Crispin, in absentia. He had to drop off. We really appreciate you taking your time to share with the world the knowledge that you have, and encouraging us also to learn, and share with our peers also. So from our end as Climate Justice Advocacy Organization, we really appreciate you, and we look forward to working with you moving forward, also in the knowledge sharing space, and also in projects. If there are any opportunities that we can work together, we really welcome all the partnerships, as we have insisted more on collaborations. So from our end, we want to thank the Federal Republic of Lost Island through its third partner, GSFM, for supporting youth action. We also want to thank Professor Anibet and Dr. Renuka for supporting youth-led climate activism and for supporting us as climate justice advocacy, even in what we are doing with the knowledge sharing. My closing aspect is I want to encourage everyone who is here, everyone who is tuned in. Let's take action and support Indigenous youth in climate activism. Thank you so much. And for those who want to connect, let's connect with our panelists. We have their LinkedIn links on the chat space. Thank you so much. Dr. Mina, we've taken note of, yes, what you've asked about, and we are going to communicate that with you. I'll share with our director, then we can look on that. Mildred, I hope you've taken note of Dr. Mina's question. Yeah, so thank you so much, guys. It's been real. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for staying with me up to the end. See you around. See you soon.
Please, can we on our camera for us to have a group picture?
Okay, yeah, mine has been on. So can we on our cameras, guys? Oops.
No light. I have no light.
Okay. I think, I don't know. Maybe the rest are not able to.
Hello, please, can we turn our camera for us to have a caption?
Okay, I think you can just take it, me and you, and the cover photos.
Okay, that is fine.
Yeah.
That is fine. Thank you.
All right. Thanks. Thank you, guys. See you around, and bye.
Thank you, Ali Basma Conte.